It is casually said that 50% of the people, by the time they turn 50, 50% of their hair will become grey. But we have seen that graying happens as early as in the mid 30s in Caucasians, late 30s in South Asians and East Asians, and in the late 40s in African Americans. In this video, I will discuss grey hair pertaining to hair transplant. In a previous video, I have discussed all the aspects of grey hair, causes and treatment. But this video is confined only to hair transplant using grey hair. There are various myths connected with hair transplant in grey hair. I will try to dispel them to the best of my ability. And also, there are certain advantages associated with grey hair and hair transplant. So I'll be going through the 5 myths, the 5 common myths of hair transplant with grey hair, and the 5 common advantages of having a hair transplant with grey hair. Well, grey hair is not aging hair. It is not senescent hair. Grey hair is merely normal hair, healthy hair that is not stained properly because the body has run out of or is running out of nature's pigment, that is melanin produced by the melanocytes in the hair bulb. And it has a lot to do with your genetics. Other causes are implicated. However, your genetics dictate when you'll grey, how you'll grey, how much you'll grey. So genetics is the principal determining factor of graying of hair, of premature graying, and the quantity of graying. So hair transplant is as successful in grey hair as it is in hair that is pigmented. Like many other centers around the world, we have done hundreds of cases of hair transplant using grey hair. Yes, hair transplant of grey hair might be technically demanding, laborious and challenging, but grey hair, when relocated, grow hair as well as pigmented hair do. Well, as you can see in this picture, this patient had salt and pepper hair and he underwent a hair transplant, and grey hair have grown with as much density as pigmented hair would have grown. The result is after 1 year, and the patient continues to maintain this hair even after 7 years of his hair transplant. In this patient, you can see that grey hair after transplantation looks wavy, looks coarse, but gives a very full effect, which perhaps pigmented hair would not. Why? Because in grey hair, because of aging, the lubrication that comes from the sebaceous glands which secrete oil decreases as time passes. So when hair is not lubricated enough by the oil glands, it becomes coarser and it becomes wavy. But the advantage here is that the hair does not stick to one another. And therefore, since it is apart, it occupies more volume and gives a much more dense look. The other thing you can notice from this is in fair-skinned people with grey hair after hair transplant, when the contrast between the skin and the hair is low, even less number of grafts will give a much more fuller look than you would have obtained with pigmented hair. This decreases the requirement of graft in patients who have grey hair. As it is, when you grow old, your donor area gets depleted. There are less anagen grafts to be relocated. So if you have grey hair with lesser number of grafts, you can get the same amount of fullness that you would otherwise achieve with pigmented hair in larger amounts. You can see another patient who used to earlier dye his hair. The age is around 80 years, underwent a hair transplant, and now when his hair have grown out and he has not yet started coloring his hair, it looks so full. We have not used too many grafts, but he is so happy with the fullness, with the density that he has achieved, and it gives him such a full look. Even in broad daylight here, you can see that the patient's density, the patient's fullness, the head full of hair look is commendable. That is because he has grey hair. Or if he had started dyeing his hair, due to greater contrast between the skin and the planted hair, the transplanted density would not have looked as lush as it does now in these pictures. So that is the beauty of transplanting grey hair in a person who has low contrast between the hair and the skin. You can see the same effect of grey hair with low skin contrast in these pictures. Most of these are Indian patients, but one of them is Caucasian patient, and you can see this Caucasian patient. He has dyed his hair, but the roots and the proximal part of the hair shaft are coming out in the natural grey color, and you can see the transition between the dyed hair and the grey hair because it's been some time since he's dyed his hair and he's come for a touch-up in the crown area. So these are the advantages of grey hair after hair transplant. So to list the 5 advantages of grey hair after hair transplant in a concise manner, number 1, grey hair with low skin hair contrast gives a much more fuller look. This is an illusion to the eye. It looks as if the patient has a head full of hair. Grey hair is usually coarse hair because as the hair runs out of pigment, so does the scalp run out of oil producing glands. The oil production becomes less with age. And as oil production becomes less with age, hair are not held together. So the hair become wavy and coarser, they occupy more volume, and they give a much more fuller look and allow for better styling and waviness. Due to less contrast between the skin and grey hair in fair people, the number of grafts that we need to use in these people who are usually around 50 and who have a donor area which is not too lush. So the number of grafts required because of less contrast between the skin and the hair. So you're saving on a lot of grafts to give the same effect as a person who has pigmented hair with fair skin. Another advantage is that grey hair can be dyed any color without first needing to bleach it. Yes, there are many dyes which don't need bleaching, but then these dyes can color your hair only 1 or 2 shades up or down. But with grey hair, you can dye your hair in any color you want. And lastly, the biggest advantage in counseling, hair transplant counseling, is that patients with grey hair have a greater insight into their baldness, into their thinning, and more wisdom about hair transplant. Their expectations are realistic, and it is a pleasure to treat them. So the 5 common myths that need to be dispelled are: number 1, doctor, is my grey hair healthy enough for a hair transplant? Will it withstand a hair transplant or not? Well, there is no difference between a grey hair and a pigmented hair because it is merely the lack of melanin. Because the melanocytes in the hair bulb are not producing as much melanin as they were producing before. Besides this pigmentation, there is no other difference between a pigmented hair and a grey hair. A grey hair is as healthy as a pigmented hair would be. Doctor, can hair transplant be done with greying hair? Yes, as I have shown in several of these before and after pictures at the commencement of this talk, hair transplant in grey hair gives as good results, if not better, as pigmented hair give. We have done hundreds of patients with grey hair. We have done hundreds of hair transplants of patients with grey hair with as much success, if not better, than those with pigmented hair. And another commonly asked question is, doctor, can only my black hair be used for the hair transplant? Well, yes, if your requirement is low, say you require only 1500 grafts and your donor area is not too grey, we can take only black hair. But we do not give any guarantee to you that these black hair that we transplant will not turn grey in the due course of time. It is very easy to take only black hair because when we take grey hair, we have to dye the hair so as to enhance the skin hair contrast while doing FUE, because FUE is a blind procedure and we have to follow the angle of the emerging hair shaft. So if we are not dyeing the hair, it is very difficult to spot a grey hair when there is low skin contrast. So by default, if we have not dyed the donor area, we are harvesting only black pigmented hair. So therefore, if you have a lesser requirement and you have adequate number of black pigmented hair in your donor area, yes, we can transplant only pigmented hair into the recipient area. No, after hair transplant, the hair do not start to grey. People who notice this finding are reporting a coincidental finding. Even if they had not had a hair transplant, the hair would still have grown grey. So this is just coincidental. It would have happened even otherwise without a hair transplant. And once I was asked a question by a patient, doctor, can I replace all my grey hair with dark hair from my donor area? Well, this is not possible because if you have high density, if you are not bald, replacing your grey hair with dark hair from the donor area will damage a lot of hair because you are not bald. There is no space to plant these hair. And even if we were to plant these hair in your recipient area, which is full density, but with grey hair, there will be tremendous amount of shock loss and there will be tremendous amount of damage to surrounding hair. So that is not a very wise thing to do. It is better to color your hair or let your hair be grey. So well, thank you for watching the second video. This was the second video of the series on grey hair. The first one was dedicated to the causes and treatment and morphology of grey hair, and this one to hair transplant in greying hair. And as you know that all my videos are basically questions asked by my patients, and if the questions are a lot, I'm forced to make a video on it. And if you also have any question, please do not forget to write in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer it. Well, if you've liked the video, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you very much for watching the video. God bless.